Welcome back to SoulBack. This is the R&B podcast. So we decided to take a week off this week because we brought in a special guest. We have Bob Robinson from the R&B production duo Tim and Bob. He joined us on the podcast, and man, he gave us so many stories about our favorite artists, our favorite albums, our favorite R&B songs from the 90s and the 2000s that I felt like we wanted to put the spotlight and the attention solely on the segment and interview that we did with him. So we're not going to have our regular banter, but man, there's so much great information here that I'm sure you'll be all right for this week. But anyway, grab your popcorn and your soda, because here we go.
Like I said, every week we try to bring in someone special, someone who has brought soul back. And Ed, I'm really excited about this one. This man is responsible for a lot of our favorite hits, including Tamia's So Into You. One half of the legendary R&B production group, Tim and Bob, we have Bob Robinson. Bob, what's going on?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Chilling. We having a good time.
Cool, man. Thank you for having me, man. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. As Kyle kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, you are responsible for some of the songs and albums that have really shaped and defined our R&B fandom. But before we get started, we always like to ask our guests, which R&B albums influenced you? So the floor is yours. Which R&B albums really helped shape you as a fan and then maybe even influence your sound going forward?
Wow, man, that's such a hard question because, man, it's so many. I would have to break that down into eras because, man, so many influences, you know, going back to the early 70s stuff with, like the Isley Brothers and Al Green and, like, a lot of those guys. I mean, and even to be completely honest, and I know this is an R&B podcast, but a lot of the influences in our music came from outside of R&B, just keeping it real with you guys. But that's the thing that makes doing this whole music thing wonderful, is you can take inspiration from, say, for instance, you can take inspiration from a Paul Simon song and make an R&B record with it. Like, that's the beauty of creating music and writing songs, is you have the ability to transcend barriers, but bring a product back to that very genre. And so, yeah, but to answer your question, I would say, to answer it as accurately as possible, I would say definitely Isley Brothers, man. Their sound, from so many different standpoints, their music just did it for me personally. And I got to be honest, like, Tim is the one that really turned me on to the Isley Brothers, like, catalog, like, not so much the singles that everyone was hearing on the radio, like You're Between the Sheets and all that. He the first one that really took me, like, nah, man, listen to this album, listen to this whole album, listen to this. And I was like, whoa. And that's when we first started, going back to when we first started producing together. So I got to say the Isley Brothers, man, you know, from that era. But as far as if you want me to be more current, pretty much anything Teddy did was like, we consider that the gospel. Anything Teddy did, like the Guys, the Future album. I mean, there's so much I could say about that one album alone. But Teddy, another heavy influence. Of course, anything Jam and Lewis did, as you can probably hear in the songs that we did in the past, anything Jam and Lewis, we always patterned ourselves after those guys. And so it was kind of like a melting pot of all those things I just named. Those are the things we would sit down when we would write and do those songs like They Don't Know, or stuff like Missing You, or any of those songs that people love that we did in the past. We would literally kind of take all of those elements. You know, Jam them had a certain way they cut their vocals, and their backgrounds were so, like, thick and lush. and the way they would have certain notes in the harmonies sitting still, but then they would take a melody and move it across the notes, and it created this certain type of cadence and certain type of tension within the song that it just made it like. And we always said, like, whenever we met Jam and Lewis, that would be the first thing we asked them: how did you guys get your backgrounds to sound like that? So it was a tons. So many influences in terms of R&B that went into the music we did. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely.
No, you hit that.
But Ed, I love that Bob mentioned Teddy Riley as one of his influences growing up. And Bob, I got to tell you, Ed right here, he's the diehard Keith Sweat #1 fan, and to this day he still raves about Keith's debut album. So, Bob, I'm going to pass it to you just so we can make Ed happy. What did you love about Keith's debut? Because that's a classic right there.
Man,
I'm glad you admitted it's a classic.
First
You're on the right
all,
page
man,
this morning.
I actually saw Keith Sweat in concert for the first time maybe 2 months ago, and it was him. It was the Isley Brothers. It was, ironically, it was Teddy, and I think it was Blackstreet that night. Yeah, it was Blackstreet, and then it was a couple other artists. Keith killed it, man. Like, I don't know if you guys ever seen Keith Sweat live, but his show is insane. Like, every song is like, oh, that was a joint. Then they go to the next one. Oh no! And like every song was like, the entire arena went crazy. Every single record, and so it was a different vibe than the other concerts because every song that he sung represented a specific moment in that era. Like, it was crazy, man. So, but man, Make It Last Forever, Right and Wrong Way, man, those will always be classics, man, and for good reason. Simplicity, great melodies, instrumentation is like, those things will never play out. Those things will never get. They don't have an expiration date. Those qualities in music, like, anytime you throw a live instrument in something, that extends the life of it. That's my belief. And so, but yeah, that Keith Sweat record, man, come on, where do you start? I mean, even I Want Her, man. Like, the way Teddy was like swinging the way he was playing the keyboard, he had a certain like swing to it. Of course, New Jack Swing, of course, but even then, he just had this certain way he laid back in the track with his production on certain things, man. Like, I mean, Teddy, man. And the other thing that was amazing about Teddy, and I'm not saying he was the first producer to do this, but he made such an impact the way he did it. He made doing slow songs cool. Like, when we first met Dallas, his assistant at the time was like, and Dave was the guy that ran everything at the studio. But the moment we met, actually before we even met Dallas, we had to go through Dave, and that's the first thing Dave said: "Don't play no slow records. We don't want to hear no slow records. Play some up tempos." And we was like, and we were prepared. We was like, man, these cats don't do slow records. Are they crazy? That's what we was thinking, man. And so that's the first thing Dave said to us, and so we played some up tempos and stuff. But yeah, man, Teddy made doing slow songs cool because his slow songs felt like up tempos. The way they knocked and the bottom they had on them, and the snap they had on them, it was like Teddy's ballads felt like ups and mids, and so. And Keith Sweat album, that first one was a prime example of that.
Kyle, we could just wrap up the podcast right now. This is already the best one ever, dog.
No, we've got so much history to talk about. Bob, when I spoke to you yesterday, we had touched on Dallas, Austin, and you just mentioned Dallas, during that whole part. But, Dallas did an interview recently, and he was talking crazy about Boyz II Men, but we don't really have to get into that part. But what I do love is that you and Tim, your names got mentioned in it, and it's sort of, in a weird way, highlighted the work that you guys did on that Boyz II Men project, because people may have forgotten. But, Ed, talk about what Tim and Bob brought to the game early on when they first came out. What did you see?
It's weird. I think that when we look back at R&B and we talk about those major names from the Boyz II Men and the monikers and those mid-'90s, early '90s trendsetters that go on to kind of push the genre forward, even into the 2000s with Cisco and what he did, is they took I wouldn't say that these were like artists who had found themselves yet. They were very, very talented. They were just finding themselves and growing into their careers. And Tim and Bob were able to present a sound that would help them not only find themselves, but define themselves. So not only were they able to be like, all right, this is a song for me, this is going to put me over, but this is a song that would define my career and legacy going ahead of time. So, tell us, Bob, how was it working with these future legends at the time, and how you were able to sit down with them and create a sound that would go on to define their careers?
Man, first of all, thank you for those kind words. Wow, man. I appreciate that.
It's real. It's real.
I appreciate that, man. But I would say, and it's interesting because that's something that I think we were aware of it, but we were to a degree we were subconsciously, all the people that we would work with. Like when we first worked with Monica, she was 12 on that Miss Thang album. She was 12 when she cut off.
Crazy. She was 12 sounding like that. She
turned 13 like right before her album came out, from what I can remember. But when we first went in the studio, and we were the first ones to take her in, because when Dallas first signed her, that's the thing he did. He was like, okay, because he was busy on, I forgot what he was working on at the moment, or he might not have been, because Dallas, when we first signed with him, he was kind of like, I won't say a depression, but he was about to produce with this. He was about to have a production partner named Randy Rand, who came from the whole Jam and Lewis camp. He was from Detroit, but he came from the Jam and Lewis camp. But Dallas was about to produce with him. But right before they were about to team up, the guy got killed in a motorcycle accident, and he was already like doing records, and he had did some stuff with Johnny Gill. He had did a few things, and so Dallas was like in this kind of depression when we met him, and he was like, I'm just not on that page right now. I'm just going to start giving y'all all my projects for the moment. And so that was the first conversation we had with him after he heard our music. And so anyway, he put us in with Monica, and we did like out the gate, we did like 10 or 12 songs, just to get her acclimated to the studio, how it works, how the process works. She was 12, and so. But even then, while we were working with her, it was kind of like honing into this sound that was like the drums were hip hop, the melodies are very pop. Her tone is kind of reminiscent of Whitney, but still she's this young, very, very urban, girl from Atlanta, and it's interesting because she was so mature for her age, and she was very comfortable in talking about, things that was talked about on the album from a 12-year-old's perspective, and so it was really interesting making that album. And vocally, she sounds like on that album is just as good as she sounds now. You can hear the slight difference that her voice matured, but she was essentially the singer she is now. She was essentially that singer when she was 12. And so, but while we were doing that album, we were kind of focusing on melodies, pop melodies, nothing really dark in terms of chords or chord progression. That's why probably none of her songs on that album were in a minor chord. And then we were focusing on, like I said, very light melodies, light keyboard sounds, pop, kind of like what a pop edge to it on the stuff that we did, and then Dallas came in with the banger with "Don't Take It Personal," and just the way Dallas wrote for her. For instance, that particular song, even though I think that song was written from someone else, by someone else, and I think Dallas kind of changed some of the things around, but that kind of set the tone for how she was going to be going forward. So when you look at that, and then when you kind of look at the other songs on the album, you know, the content of the songs, melodically, musically, what was going on, you know, it was a very well-rounded album. And like, say, for instance, when we did 112, it was kind of the same approach, but we took more almost like an approach as if, well, they were actually gospel singers. And so we were very much fans of this gospel group. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but they're called Commission, group out of group out of Detroit, and that's where Fred Hammond comes from. And so we kind of wanted to make 112 like an R&B version of Commission. So when we were in the beginning kind of doing their first songs and taking them in the studio, you know, we were kind of honing in on more of that kind of sound, still kind of the same elements with that we did with Monica. And we did these projects very close in proximity in terms of time. I would say we did those albums within a year of each other. And but the 112 album was more almost like a gospel, not so much gospel, but gospel in terms of the harmony structure was a little bit more gospel. And a little bit more sophisticated than the Monica vocal arrangements we did. But that was what it was like kind of for 112. And then, ironically, at the time we were working on Mr., and, you know, Bobby V comes from the group Mr. You know, they had that hit back then, Blackberry and Molasses. But we were working on Mr. back then, too. And so it was kind of the same thing, some banging beats, the melodies, the chord structure remind you of Midwest pop songs. Like a lot of our melodies were heavily influenced, like I was saying earlier, even though we're known for doing R&B songs, our influence was from pop records, man. Like, because where we grew up, Peoria, Illinois, is a small town right in between Chicago and St. Louis, right pretty much in the center of the state of Illinois. And at that time, there was no urban radio in our city. And so the only way you heard urban radio was you had to connect the cable from your TV to your stereo. This is old school right here. You have to connect the cable from you know what I'm talking about. You have to take the cable from the TV and connect it to your stereo. So that would give you a wider range of radio stations. So you could pick up some Chicago stations, maybe one or two of the Chicago stations, but otherwise all you heard was the Carpenters, Kenny Loggins, America, Carole King. That's what we grew up on, man. And even me, like, I started playing the organ in church when I was 8. And Tim's father was in bands and stuff around town. And so Tim was getting a different influence than I was getting. Like, in my home, like, we didn't listen to a lot of R&B music. But in Tim's home, it was the polar opposite. Because his dad was in a band that was actually very similar to Earth, Wind & Fire. Like, they had the horn section, like, they was, you know, a full band. And so, but I think that's the thing that actually worked to our advantage, was our different influences individually. And so, like I said, like, when me and Tim linked up, that's the first thing he did was like, "You into the Isley Brothers?" I was like, "Yeah, I heard In Between the Sheets." He's like, "Have you heard their other stuff, though?" I'm like, "Yeah, a few of them." He's like, "Man, what?" And so that's when I really went through their whole catalog. And then I was just like, whoa, man. And it was interesting because I did the same thing with Tim, because Tim wasn't familiar with Commission. And back then, like, any of these R&B groups, like whether it's Boyz II Men, Jodeci, Blackstreet, any of the groups from the 90s, Shy, any of those guys, I can assure you are influenced by the group Commission. And so any singers out there know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, but Tim, at the moment when we met, he wasn't familiar with Commission. And I was like, what? You aren't familiar with Commission? And so then he had that experience from the gospel side. And so, and again, these were things that work so much to our advantage, you know, because all those influences would come to aid us, whoever we worked with. And so, so to go back to your question, that's how we approached a lot of different artists at the time. I'll try to give you another example. Even with, let's say, Bobby V, when we did the first album, it was 2005. But our approach then was, you know, wow, no one's ever messed with any Asian samples, Asian sounds, and Tim had sampled some stuff off of the last Samurai film with Tom Cruise. It's funny because we actually ended up having to pay handsomely for one of the Bobby V songs that was sampled. I think it was Tell Me. Yeah, we had to pay handsomely for that sample because we thought we were going to be able to get away with not having to clear it, but wasn't the case. But anyway, when we did that album, that was the approach. Banging drums, Asian samples, or Asian different sounding samples, different sounding programming in terms of keyboard sounds, a lot of atmospheric stuff. We've always been into atmospheric sounds and, you know, a lot of things you generally don't hear in R&B. A lot of drum and bass. We know when drum and bass was popping at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. We was heavy into that. So we would always apply all these different musical influences in the music. And so Bobby V was the same. We knew we wanted to do. We already knew, like, as far as the melodies, and when you get that in contrast to the hip hop drums, the Asian sounding samples, and then here comes some pop melodies, you know, that probably was influenced by a James Taylor song. So when you meld all those things together, like, that's when you start realizing, okay, this is something not many people are doing. Taking pieces of genres, just pieces of it, and knowing how to apply them within the context of an R&B song. So I think that was, if you had to say or ask what was the secret to our success, I would say that would be the closest way I could answer that. But yes, that's what we would do when we would work with an artist, try to give them their own sound. We knew a lot of people, still a lot of people don't actually use guitar in their records, which I find fascinating, you know, because radio loves, like I said earlier, radio loves live instruments. Radio will always play songs with guitars. Radio will always play songs with piano. That won't ever change. And so, yes, that's what our approach would be with artists and giving them their own sound. And it's funny because I think we didn't even realize that we were doing that till probably years after we had been producing. And then we would look back like, whoa, this is actually the pattern that we kind of did all along the way. So, yes.
Nice. Man, I'm so glad you brought up the 112 debut album. And what I love about that project on the songs that you guys did, none of those songs sound like each other. Come and See Me doesn't sound anything like Now That We're Done. Ed, that album is a 5-star classic, Ed?
I've been talking about this album for a long time, Bob, on this podcast, but it's one of my all-time favorites, and I love that you were able to, like Kyle said, the sounds are different, but similar enough that it completes the package, and that's why I think that debut works so well.
Wow, you know what? I'm glad that you have brought that album up, too, or posted that, because I hadn't listened to that album in a long time, and so when I saw that, I was like, man, let me go listen to it. And I was listening to, matter of fact, I was listening to what you had posted, the the Y interlude, right?
Mhm.
And I hadn't heard that interlude probably in over 15 years.
Wow.
So, and I was listening to it. I was like, wow. And we just, I guess the best way I can put it is we've always tried to be innovative, as innovative as we could, but still keeping it commercial. And that first 112 album, what was crazy about the 112 album was, and without, because I definitely learned something from the Dallas interview that certain things just don't need to be discussed in a public forum. But I'll just say that in the beginning of the 112, like we had put those guys together, because how it happened was our barber at the time, his name was Courtney Seals. He goes by Bear. Everyone in Atlanta knows Bear. And so he was cutting out. This is why we were signed to Dallas, because when we first was getting in the flow of everything, and we hit Dallas, we were like, hey man, can you hook us up with a barber here? And he was like, yeah, we'll have one of the homies come by and hook y'all up. So that's how we first met Courtney. And so after a few weeks of him coming by cutting our hair, we were starting to get antsy, because we was getting on big projects and stuff, like, obviously the Bozeman stuff. And when we first signed with Dallas, the first thing we did was Tina Turner. A lot of people don't know that I Don't Want to Fight, it was from the What's Love Got to Do with the soundtrack.
Yeah,
I know. We
it.
didn't do the original version of the song, but we did a remix. But that's actually the first song that we did that hit radio, was the remix we did to Tina Turner song. So we came out the gate like on some pretty big names, obviously. And so when we were doing all these projects and wasn't getting singles as far as albums, like for instance, Monica, we didn't get a single off of there. It was a bunch of projects. I can't even remember a lot of the artists' names that we were doing all these projects back then. We would get like 3-4 songs in the album, but we wouldn't get a single. So we go to Dallas, like, man, how come we start getting singles? He's like, y'all need your own group. Y'all need your own artists. He said, y'all should put a group together, man. Y'all put a group together. If I like them, I'll get them signed. Or I'll sign them myself. I was like, cool. So this is around the same time our barber was done by cutting our hair. So he's hearing the conversations between us and Dallas. So one day he was like, hey, man, I'm telling you, man, I know some talented singers, man. If I can start bringing you guys bringing y'all some singers, would y'all do the group? Can we do the group thing together? I was like, absolutely. So he started bringing singers by. Yeah, we liked him. Yeah, he's okay. Oh, he's dope. He's dope right there. Yeah, let's remember this cat right here. And he would bring a singer by probably once a week to the studio. So a lot of people don't know this too. A couple of the guys that were originally supposed to be in 112 was actually one of the couple of guys in Jagged Edge. Wingo was a step away from being in 112. Like, he was at the studio every day. We was, I think, on a couple of the early demos, Wingo was actually singing on the demos, and him and Q in 112 were best friends anyway. So, it's when I think about all these things, it's crazy to go back and talk about it. But anyway, so when we had the 4 guys that are in the group now, that's when we started, developing, because they were dope writers anyway. From day one, like I think 112 are probably some of the most underrated writers in business. As successful
Agreed.
as they've been.
Agreed.
Super underrated as writers. They pretty much wrote 70% of their first album. And so anyway, we were helping them, developing them with the, song structure, how to, just how to work their raw talent, because we all were green. We were all super green when I look at it now, but we at least were around Dallas every day, and we were absorbing so much knowledge from him on production, radio, how to get on the radio. So we immediately started applying these things. So we put 112 together, and so Dallas, it was interesting. he just wasn't feeling him enough to sign him initially. And then we kept developing him for like a year and a half, close to 2 years. And then we had came out to L.A. for some business. Matter of fact, we were working on Bozeman, and then when we got back, that's when Puff had a lot of interest in them. And the way it went down, it was just, you know, it was like, I'll just say that it was not the way we would have wanted it to go down, but we were able to work past that. But initially, we actually refused to work on the guys. And so they initially had Devontae do their first album.
Oh, wow.
Puff didn't like the album. He didn't like the way it was going. It was Devontae, it was a few other people that they had put him in the studio and they couldn't get them to sound the way Puff had heard these demos that we had did sounded. So I never forget the day Puff called me. He was like, yo, man, y'all got to be on this record, man. We got to make this right. Y'all got to be on this record. And so then I hit Tim. I told him, I said, man, Puff just called me. Let's talk to Dallas, man. So we talked to Dallas, and Dallas was like, because Dallas was upset the way everything went down. And he was like, I'm going to leave that up to y'all, man. I'm going to leave that up to y'all. Dallas was actually hot over it because he saw us developing those guys over 2 years and then the way it went down. But anyway, we all were able to reconcile that situation, and we went in with them, and then we went up to New York for like a month, and that's when we started. The first song I think we did with them was Now That We're Done. And it's crazy because these stories go from one to the other. Like 3 of the songs that went on 112 first album were actually songs that didn't go on Boyz II Men's 2 album. And so, because we had did so many songs on the 2 album that, and at the end of the 2 album was around the same time we're in the beginning stages of developing 112. So we knew Wanye, because, you know, Wanye knew that we were developing this group, rather. And so Wanye actually met us in New York, and we did Now That We're Done in a little while, and we did a few other songs with them. And that's how we started the album that ended up coming out. And so, but yeah, man, it was interesting back then, but that's how 112 came about, because Dallas wanted us, but we went to him like, man, we want some singles, man. How can we, you need your own artist? And so that was one of the first lessons we learned. And so, and ironically, we did have a single on 112, but it didn't make a lot of noise, just being honest. It was Come See Me, which was still one of my favorite songs on the album. But the album was hugely successful, and that was like their 4th single or 5th single on that album. So it was pretty much maxed out at the time. But yeah, that's a little inside history behind that, and how 112 came about. But it's so many stories as I tell that story that I think of, or other things that were going on at that time. Like when I think about, for instance, when we were working on the album, Brandy, you know, she used to come to the studio with us, because that was shortly after she came out. So she was just sitting in the studio hanging out. Who else? Like somebody else was actually sitting in the studio when we was recording 112. And I was like, wow, if people knew that, it was crazy. But anyway, all these little bitty side stories, man. So much history, and wow, it's so cool to actually sit here and talk about it, because, you know, it's not often that I get the chance to sit down and remember all these things and go over them. So it's pretty cool to talk about.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you for sharing these stories too, because, man, as diehard R&B fans, we love, you know, even with the Dallas interviews, even though, you know, there was a lot of negativity in it, just right. As people that lived through the 90s and love the 90s, it's always just awesome to hear stories that come from that era.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, Dallas, what I want to do, Bob, what I want to do here is, you know, I want to touch on some of the records that you guys have done, some sleepers that Ed and I think are great. But before we do that, Ed, I'm going to say this. One thing I loved about Tim and Bob's production is that, you know, they had the big singles the career-defining singles, but they also have those sleepers, Bob, like I mentioned, like Conversate by Case, those records that aren't necessarily the big ones, but when you get that album, because back in the day we actually bought albums, you would end up on that song and you would just repeat it over and over because it was the highlight. Ed, do you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And to this day, that's why I still love albums so much. Y'all know if I can cop the physical CD, I will cop it, because to me, the single was the entry point, but like the meat and potatoes are those album cuts.
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that resonate with a brother. And when I think about the ones I love from Bob, I remember, Kyle, I don't know if you remember this. This was maybe a year or so ago. We had Bobby V on. And one of my favorite songs from 2005, I don't even know if you remember this one, Bob, Want You to Know Me, from Bobby's debut.
Yep.
Love that joint. Love it. I was like, why y'all ain't made this a single? Love this joint. So it's those little songs like that just, to me, that's what makes an album.
Yes, I totally agree, man. Wow, that was a sleeper on that album, man. Want You to Know Me. That's crazy. You know what? Another one I love from that album was, it's crazy, to be honest with you. A lot of the sleepers actually were ones that didn't make his album, but you can find them on YouTube. There's stuff on YouTube that we did that I don't even have copies of, man. But there's a lot of Bobby V stuff unreleased that's on YouTube that was meant for his first album that was like, you know, it was just, we were in such a zone on that album. We finished the album in 2 weeks. Start to finish, it was done. It was done. The recording process, start to finish, was done in 14 days. That's not exaggeration. Like,
crazy.
Okay, I'll say this, with the exception of, I think, 2 songs, which were like basically some demos, with the exception of maybe 2 songs. He came out here, we finished that album in, I want to say, like 10 days. And then we called Shaka, you know, who's running DDP at the moment, was like, Shaka, we done, man. It's like, nah, there's no way. So then him and Luda and Jeff, you know, Shaka's brother, the other manager, they managed Luda. They all flew out, and we played everything, and they was like, what? And so then the crazy part was, Slow Down was never supposed to be the first single, but this is how it happened. Because we initially had cut some songs with Bobby. That's why I was saying, like, with the exception of 2 or 3 songs, we had cut, and we had kind of like did a couple meetings, but we wasn't really getting any traction in the meetings. It was like, yeah, he's cool, but he's cool. What else you got? And that's what it was like, wow. So one night, and at the time, this guy, this DJ, PJ Butter, was DJing, and he had this segment in the evenings here in LA where he would play unsigned music. And so one night Tim was like, hey, man, I'm just going to run this up to PJ Butter. We'll just see what happens. So then the next day he was like, hey, man, the phones was lighting up, man. Y'all should come through tonight. I'm going to do it again. We'll just see what happens. This is Slow Down. And now this is after Bobby didn't have nothing going on. This was before Luda came into the picture or anything. You know, just was nothing was happening. So PJ Butter played it a second night. Phones, and this time we're in there in the studio looking at the phones lighting up. Wow, who is this? Who is this? This song is dope. It's such a different sound. Who is he? What does he look like? Where is he from? And so then, because he's mentioning Melrose, a lot of people initially thought he was from L.A. And so this goes on for maybe a week or 2, I think, and then it started really just catching fire. And at the time, PJ Butter's wife, which was, I can't remember her name, she was a DJ during the daytime. So she ended up playing it. I think he was filling in for her segment during the daytime or something, because from what I remember, she was pregnant and she was out on maternity leave, so he would fill in for her sometimes during the day, which were like the peak hours. And so he started playing it during the daytime, and that's when it really went crazy. So then, like, maybe this is like a month or 2 later, and it's like the number one record in LA, and everyone's like, "Who is Bobby V? What does he look like? Who is Bobby V? Who is Bobby V?" And it was crazy because he didn't even have a deal. And so at this point, that's when we was like, okay, we started putting a plan together. And this is like, what was this, 2005? So it was about 14 years ago. So from what I can remember, this is how it went. And I just remember at the time we were about to, separate from Bobby V, we were about to actually run the R&B department for Disturbing the Peace. So we were already talking to Luda about that. And we've been friends with Luda since before he was rapping. So he was family to us anyway, back to when he was just DJing in Atlanta. When he got out of college, he was Chris. That's when he was Chris Lover. And so, but anyway, we were already talking with him about running his R&B label. He was basically going to do an R&B label. He's like, "Man, y'all my guys. I want y'all to do it." It was like, cool. So when Bobby started popping off, that's when, we was the three, us, Bobby, and Luda was like, man, maybe, he should just sign Luda. We do the album, we run it through DTP. It's already set up. And so that's how the conversation started. So anyway, fast forward to 6 months later, the song is still popping in LA. It's not even playing anywhere else. And that's when Luda signed him. We went in the studio, completed the album, and so we're back here in a meeting in LA. And then Shaka was like, "Hey man, we need to stop playing to slow down." Because now, mind you, keep in mind it wasn't playing nowhere else, so Shaka wasn't fully aware, like on a daily basis, how fired the record was out here in LA. It was like neck and neck with Yeah at the time from Usher. So I think Yeah had just came out. And it was like one day his song would be the number one song of the day. The next day, Yeah would be. It was like back and forth out here in LA. And so then Shaka was like in a meeting, he said, "Man, we got to stop. Let's I'm going to start calling these programmers telling them to stop the record because that's not his first single, man. That don't need to be his first single. That's cool that it got everybody's attention, but we need to go with Give Me a Chance." Shaka really wanted Give Me a Chance to be the first single.
Really?
That's one featuring. Yeah, that was going to be this. So Shaka, he called the stations here, like, put a stop on the record, and they told him, "All right, we'll stop playing it, but you crazy if you stop playing this record, man. It's going too crazy." And so ultimately, as far as that, Shaka was like, "Okay, I'll stand down. We'll roll with it." But Give Me a Chance that's the one that Shaka wanted to be the first single. So it was like radio forced it to be the single. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man, that was crazy to go back and think of. And then that's when it went for ads, and that's when it went to all the other stations. And then it came out when it was released as a single. It was number one for 4 weeks. But imagine had it been catching all of those earlier spins 4 or 5 months leading up to that when he wasn't even signed. It was crazy. The record was like playing in L.A. for at least 4 months before he got signed, from what I can remember. It was hot for a long time. It kind of had like fizzled out a little bit in L.A. by the time it was released as a single, and it still was number one for a month on the charts. And so, yeah, man, that was pretty crazy how that all went down. But
that's wild.
Slow Down was like accidentally the first single. Yeah, man.
It all worked out though.
It really did. It really did. Yeah. And I know we was talking about sleepers on that album, but there's so many. I feel there's so many sleepers on that album. Like the one joint.
I was gonna say One Girl to Love. That's a sleeper.
That's what you did. You say One Girl to Love?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I was gonna bring. I was gonna say the one that didn't have a beat in it, because we did a few songs like that with Bobby with no beat in it. But yeah, that One Girl to Love, man, because obviously that's us, paying homage to Jam and Lewis and that, just the piano strings, when Jam and them did Tender Love. So a lot of times that's what we would do too. Oh, let's do a record on such and such. Let's do something that feel like Tender Love, just piano and strings, or just guitar and strings, or just guitar and piano. So that's another thing we would do. We would take songs that, you know, had a certain impact, and we would want to do something with that feel, something that felt like that. But yeah, man.
That's awesome. Now, Bob, we interviewed Tim a while ago, and he was telling us about the vault, all the unreleased stuff that we've never heard about. And before we get into that, I do want to give a quick shout-out to you guys for producing the song Tell Me by Destiny's Child, because that brought out a different flavor to the group,
wow.
and I know you guys had a huge part in developing them. But, you know, Tim was telling us you guys have a demo version of Into You with Brandy's vocals on it. Tim was telling me about how you guys have a bunch of unreleased Destiny Child songs. What else do you guys have in this vault, just so the fans can get excited and maybe even mad?
Man, you know what's crazy? And he might have mentioned this to you guys, but something that's crazy is that never got released. And I saw the DAT the other day in my my little suitcase I have at home with some old DATs in it. Man, we worked with Dre. The crazy thing was, this was 97, from what I can remember, 1997, Thanksgiving. We were at Dre's crib having Thanksgiving dinner, and then we went right into the studio, right down the hall from his dining room. He had an SSL sitting right there. It was crazy. He had, what his vision was on that album was he was going to get other producers to produce every song on him. It ended up, and this was for the Detox album it was, but the album ended up changing so many times and it never came out that way, but that was the initial concept for the album, Dre getting produced by other producers. We was the first ones that he went in the studio, because I'll never forget, when he first went in the booth, he was like, yo, man, this is crazy, man. This is really my first time that another producer is producing me, man. This is crazy, man. How y'all feel right now? And we were just like, wow, man. Of course, we were honored, but the coolest part, well, not the coolest part, but one of the coolest parts is Jay-Z wrote the rhymes. Like, he literally had reached out to Jay-Z. Jay-Z wrote him 2 songs, but it was 2 tracks that we did. When I say these 2 joints were so fire, man, crazy. Jay-Z wrote the joint for Dre. People don't even know it. One was called Malibu Dre, and the other one was called Hey You. Yeah, those were the 2 songs, Malibu Dre and Hey You. And those were recorded in 97. Yeah,
man. 97,
crazy.
Dre, Tim and Bob beat off of the original
and
Detox.
Jay-Z wrote them.
Wow.
Sitting on history. You got history in your suitcase,
because at the time, and how we linked up with Dre was because a friend of ours, he was from the East Coast, but he moved down to Atlanta, and we met him through our manager at the time, Nate Smith. But his name was Big Chuck, and Big Chuck knows everyone. And so when we got with Big Chuck, he was like, oh, man, I'm running this is when Dre first set up Aftermath, and Big Chuck was running Aftermath. He's like, I'm linking y'all with Dre ASAP. And sure enough, we started doing a lot of the R&B stuff. We did anytime Dre had an R&B artist, he would call us, yo, man, I got this dope dude, man. Can y'all come out to L.A.? Or actually, was we living out here at that time? Because a lot of the stuff we did, or all the stuff we did with Dre was out here in L.A., but when we worked with him, we hadn't yet moved out here. But, so yeah, he had an artist named Ruben, an R&B artist. We worked on Ruben. When he had Donald Robinson, when he had Truth Hurts, we worked with Truth. So yeah, man, we always, been linked up with Dre and doing a lot of R&B stuff with him, and so it was an honor, to have done that with him, even though it was never released. The fact that Jay-Z wrote some records, 2 songs for Dre, just that concept is crazy. 2 icons. So yeah, that's one of the biggest sleepers like unreleased in the Tim and Bob, library that exists that I can think of. But if I could think of anything else, definitely a lot of unreleased Destiny's Child stuff. Tons of Bobby V stuff that never came out. You know what else? We did some dope records with Tank that never were released. And they weren't released because, it's funny because they're all over YouTube right now. Just go to YouTube and put in Tank and Tim and Bob. You'll find pretty much the whole album on there. I still don't know how those songs got on there, but basically Tank was signed to the same label at the time that Joe was signed to, the singer JoJo.
Oh, yeah.
And it was crazy because Barry Hankerson, it was his label, that's Aaliyah's uncle. And, Barry Hankerson, he used to manage R. Kelly. I think he used to manage R. Kelly. But anyway, we were right in the middle of working on Tank album. We did this other pop artist that was signed to the album. And Barry Hankerson just woke up one day like, I'm done with music. And shut down the label, let the artist go. And we was like 7 songs deep with Tank. We was like, and they were smashes. If you haven't heard them, when this interview is over, just go to YouTube and put in Tank, Tim and Bob. And I'll give you a hint. Go to Lost in You. That was the first. That's probably one of the sickest songs we've ever done. We did a song with Tank called Lost.
I'm definitely doing that. Trust.
Yeah. But yeah, man, it's so many. It's crazy because we probably have more things come. I mean, they didn't come out. More things be unreleased, meaning they get all the way to being mastered and then didn't come out. Like there was this one project that Rosie Perez brought to Dallas when we were signed to Dallas, and it was a girls group, R&B group. They were called 5 a.m., but they were Rosie Perez's group. They came to Atlanta. We did the whole album. We did over half the album. And these girls were dope, man. The songs were dope. They did a video, everything, mastered the album, and then it came out, got dropped. That happened on a few occasions, man. Like, and that's just part of the game, It just happens. So that's why a lot of times it's an adjustment. And early in our careers, man, if we heard a label wasn't using a song we did, we was really like, yo, are y'all crazy? You're not going to use this? Did y'all really listen to that? We would take it personal, man. And, we eventually learned that you have to let go, man. And you have to do your work, let go, and move on. Don't be attached to that. I know that's what I learned. I can speak for myself on that. But yeah, man, is because you become attached to the song. They're like your children, and when someone is like, nah, I'm cool on that, or say you playing the song for them and you spent 3 days working on it, they hear the first 2 seconds, go to the next one, and you're like, right. What? Because Puff will do that in a minute. Anybody that knows Puff will work with him. You playing songs for him, 2 seconds into the intro, go to the next one. Go to the next one. Like,
wow.
But because he knows what he's looking for, And so, but yeah, man, so many unreleased, and it's a lot of times I'll be listening to or going through my computer and I come across some songs. I'm like, man, I wonder if I should post this. Like the stuff we did on Mary J. Blige, never released. It was sick.
Wow.
I can think of so many. Nas, we did 4 or 5 joints with Nas, never released. We did a lot of stuff that did come out with Nas, like the Joe Get to Know Me. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Very familiar with that.
On there, and so, but yeah, we did like 4 or 5 joints with Nas, man. Never got released, and I will say they actually wasn't actually completed. They were more like ideas, but they were sick though. A couple of them were completed. Yeah. But I just thought of another sleeper that people may not know that we work with Game. We had, ironically, V. Bozeman. You familiar with V. Bozeman?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we know her.
she was in a group. I can't remember the group's name. Excuse me, but we were working on this group, and she was the lead singer of the group, and we were about to have them signed and everything. They actually did a song on the soundtrack, but we were working on a deal for them, and it ended up not working out ultimately. But we were in the studio one day out here in L.A., and Game just poked his head in the room, like, "Yo, what's up, fellas?" It was like, "Yo, what's up, bro?" And then he's like, y'all Tim and Bob. I was like, yeah. It was like, we're big fans of yours. He's like, I'm a big fan of y'all, man. Y'all dudes is dope, man. If y'all ever need any bars, man, just let me know, man. What y'all working on right here? And it was one of the songs, and so he's like, let me check it out. And so, sure enough, he ended up getting on the song right then and there. And then another song we ended up doing with him, I can't remember the artist's name. Please forgive me, man. There's so many people when you're thinking of songs and artists. Like, there's another artist, and this was about 15, 16 years ago. There was another artist we worked on, and he did some bars on, and it was like, what song was that? I can't remember, but, again, as I'm telling these stories, I keep thinking of more stories of things that didn't come out and like, oh, man, I got to mention this. So my mind is like scrambled right now, but with a bunch of stories that I'm tempted to go into, but we'll be on the phone for 3 more hours.
It's all good, man.
Yeah, man.
I hope you know with all these stories that you're sharing with us, all these songs that haven't come out, people are going to be sliding into your DMs asking for them.
I'm gonna be one of them because I want to hear that Dre. I want to hear that Nas. I ain't gonna lie. Yes.
I'll be honest, man. If out of respect to that artist, I probably wouldn't do it. But if I personally don't mind sharing the music, because it's what harm is that? You know what I mean? But like one time I was tempted to post a piece of the Mary J. Some of the stuff we did with Mary. But I was like, nah, definitely don't want to get a call from Mary getting cussed out.
No, I know you don't.
But yes, I did have another cool story that this is really quick, but again, one of those things that if people knew, they would be like, whoa. We were working with Will Smith on the Men in Black 2 soundtrack. And so that particular week, we were at the record plant in L.A., and we had a lot of times when because at one point, man, we had the record plant booked probably a year straight every single day. Like, everybody knew you come into the studio, the first room to the right, that was the Tim and Bob room. So we had 2 sessions going on this particular time. We were working with Will in one room, and we were working with gospel legend Karen Clark in the other room. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Clark sisters or Karen Clark, but
very familiar.
Icons in gospel music, icons, absolute icons. So, but we didn't know that Will was coming to the studio at this particular time. So we're in the studio, and Will just walks in the room into our session with Karen Clark, and her daughter is like a really famous singer now, Clark Sheard. Yep. She was 10 years old at the time, but it was her and her mother. And me and Tim in the studio, we were kind of listening back to what we had did the day before, because we wasn't expecting Will for like several hours later, and Will just walked in the room. What's up, guys? I was like, yo. And so Karen literally, she seen him and started bawling, crying.
Wow.
And so Will seen her, and he was like, oh, my God, wow. And then by this time, Will's, his right hand, rapper Omar came in, too. Like, Omar was like, oh, my God, whoa, hold on. Omar started bowing to her, like, oh, my God, what an honor. And then Will was like, I'm honored. And she's just bawling, crying, like, oh, my God, you're Will Smith, and you're saying you're honoring me. So it was this moment. There was this really cool, amazing moment in the studio. And then another part of that story is we had, so we're talking, all of us are sitting in the room talking, and Will is like, wow, I'm so honored to meet you, you know, man, if my mother was here right now, he started talking about if his mother was in the room right now, she would be tripping. And, you know, Karen was like, oh, my God, you have no idea. I'm so honored to meet you and my daughter, and wow. And so they took pictures, and Will was like, yeah, let me hear what you guys doing. So we played them all the records. And then he was like, hey, if you want me to get on one of these songs, just let me know. So it ended up not happening. But she was like, oh, my God. It was just such a cool moment. But another thing cool that happened in that session was Kiki actually was demoing, because this particular day, Karen just wanted Kiki to, like, start getting used to the studio. So she was like, hey, guys, let's have her demo. After you guys write a song, let's have her demo. I was like, that's a great idea. And so she demoed the song. She nailed it. And so Sylvia Rohn had just happened to call in at the time when we had did it. And Karen was playing the demo, you know, the demo lead vocal down so she could hear the song over the phone. So Sylvia Rohn could hear it over the phone. And that's how Kiki got her record deal. That's how Kiki got her record deal that day.
Wow.
Sylvia said over the phone,
crazy.
She's a signed artist, and that's where Kiki's career started. It was that day. It was the same day that Will came to the studio. It was crazy.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah, man. But there's all these amazing moments, man, and that I'm so happy to have been a part of and continue to be a part of, man, and just like, wow, people could see this, man, who I'm in the presence of right now or what's going on in this room right now. So many moments, man, that just, it makes it all worth it, man. It makes all the unpleasant parts, or it makes all the, you know, like when I think about, you know, me and Tim, man, we went into Atlanta. We drove into Atlanta on December 31st, 1992, with about $60 each. We didn't know anyone. We didn't have anywhere to stay. And we did okay for ourselves, man, you know. And so and even before we even got to that point where we had the courage to, you know, be willing to make that sacrifice to go to Atlanta, because I think when we left, you know, to drive there, I had like $80 on me, and I think Tim had like maybe $120 on him. That was it. But we wasn't worried about a thing. We was just like, oh, if it don't work out, we'll just come back home. You know, so but when you're willing to make those types of sacrifices, you get those type of results. You know,
and to take that kind of chance, because like, look at just two brothers with a few dollars in their pocket revolutionize R&B for the next 20 years just because they took a chance. Look at that story.
Thank you. But we did, and amen. And so that's what I like to think about now, in terms of, you know, setting an example for my kids, or what legacy, you know, what's Tim and Bob's legacy. That's what I think about now, you know, because here we are, we haven't worked together for maybe 5 years or so, but that's what I focus on now. You know, we had a good run. That's how I look at it. And so, you know, and, you know, we continue to do things. I'm sure he's doing his thing or whatever, and I continue to do my thing or whatever, and it's a different chapter in our lives. But, you know, I'm very proud of what we did, and very grateful that we knew we had something early on, like, okay, we got something special. And so I'm glad that, you know, the world felt the same way, and to this day, like, it's crazy because, like, some of these songs are more popular now than they've ever been. Like, So Into You is more popular now by far than it's ever been. Even when it came out and went number one, the song wasn't as popular as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 20 years ago. Same thing with They Don't Know. The song is more popular now. Like, you know, Missing You. The song, especially now with the Wyatt and Lucci record, like, it's breathed new life into that song. And so, like, I think about those type of things, and I'm like, I'm just grateful, man, and just grateful, man, and it feels good to go back and listen to those things. Like me sitting and listening to some of the 112 album yesterday, I'm like, whoa, okay, this is nice. It was almost like it was songs I've never heard before because I haven't listened to them in a while. And but yeah, man, it felt good to listen to those records, man, and to. I think I actually went and listened to something else that we did, too. I was like, whoa. Oh, yeah, the Monica album. I went and listened to the Monica album. I was like, because I hadn't listened to her album probably in over 15, 20 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, man. So it feels good, man. It feels good, and I'm grateful, and I'm glad that we're able to touch people, man, just doing something we love, and that we still have the opportunity to do that. So I feel very blessed, man. I feel very blessed.
Yeah. So, Bob, final question for you. We're almost out of time here. Appreciate all the stories that you've shared with us. I know a lot of our listeners are going to be loving this, but we got to find out what you're working on today. Of course, you had My Man by Tamar. That was a huge single, Grammy nominated. What else is going on for you right now?
Thanks. Well, right now, speaking of V. Bozeman, I'm working with her. She actually just booked a film. It's either a film or a series, a big series that she just booked with opposite T.I. and the other actress. I can't think of her name. It's Robin Thicke's ex-wife. I can't think of her name. But she just booked a really nice filming situation with that project, and so I think right now she took a little time off recording, but we were right in the middle of recording. So I'm working with her, working with Ron Isley. It's interesting when I mentioned the Keith Sweat concert earlier in the interview, I was actually going to the concert to meet with Ron, and so working with Ron right now, and what else? A couple of new artists. Cody Shane out of Atlanta. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's making a lot of noise. ATL, Cody Shane, young, innovative. She's a superstar. But working with Cody right now. I actually manage a couple producers. I co-manage a couple producers as well. One in particular, a guy named Valley out of ATL, sick production, dope artist. So we got some cool things popping off. So yeah, man, between that and I spend a lot of time mentoring young producers and writers almost on a daily basis, and I enjoy it, man, because I think what better way to pay forward all the knowledge that I've gotten along the way. I mean, coming up, under Dallas, man, pretty much a genius. People don't know. And, and then to have mentors like L.A. Reid on a daily basis and Daryl Simmons and Babyface and Teddy, and to become friends with these guys that we grew up idolizing, man, and to be friends with these guys now is crazy. There's still times where I'll be in the studio with Babyface or something, and I'm just looking at man, this is Babyface right here, man. I'm sitting there working with Babyface, man. And so it's I love it, man, and it's just a blessing, and I'm completely honored. But yeah, I still try to keep myself busy, and both my kids in college now, and so it's cool to see them in their lives now. My son is doing very well with his music. I don't even play guitar on him. Whenever I see my son, when he comes in, I put my guitar down. I just like sitting and listening to him, and he's very into the production and all that good stuff. My daughter, my daughter is the one that lets me know what's going on in music. She always knows who's going to be that next dude, like, she was the first person to tell me about Kodak Black like 4 years ago, when people hadn't even heard of him. And my daughter's 18. She's like, "Dad, you gotta listen to Kodak Black. It's a lot of cussing, but just overlook all the cussing." This was her talking to me when she was 13. And then and she always listening to lyrics and songs. Like, so my daughter, it won't shock me if she ended up at a label running an A&R department or at a film company, because she's super creative. But anyway, my keeping me young for sure. So I'm enjoying my time I'm spending with them at this point in their lives. And so so right now I just try to keep a good balance on everything as far as time, because, man, probably for the first 20 years it was all music. Now I can't do that because music. And then you look on the other side of it, and your kids are growing up being like, "Whoa, man, hold on. Let's get this thing back in balance." And so you start to see things a little different, and you start to utilize your time more wisely and appropriately. And you still, you're still productive. You still can be productive and everything. You don't have to, like right now, I don't have to burn the midnight oil every night like we did, 15 years ago. It was unusual to come home before 5, 6 in the morning, but now it's interesting because those are the hours I actually like to start work. I like wake up at 6 and go right into my studio and start working. 6 a.m. That's my favorite time to work now. So it's a little different. I'm a little older now, so I'm making those adjustments, but I'm enjoying it, man, and I'm happy, man. And still taking things a day at a time, and yes, sir. But that's what's going on with me these days, and yeah, man, I'm still inspired, and the simplest things in life inspire me to keep going forward and doing music, and that's what I'm doing for the moment. We'll see where I end up.
That's awesome, Bob. So, we're out of time now. We appreciate you for joining us. You just got to do us one favor when you're putting out these new projects, and then we'll definitely let you go. You got to bring back bridges, because R&B songs don't have bridges anymore, and Ed is very sad about that.
Oh, wow.
I'm very annoyed by this, Bob. I've been heated, so help a brother out.
You're right, man, because when I was listening to the K song yesterday, when the bridge came in there, I was like, whoa, because I hadn't heard the song in so long, and I literally didn't know where the song was going, so when it went to the bridge, I was like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'm listening to
bring
it
them
like
back.
I didn't have nothing to do with it, but yeah, man, you're so right about that. That's that era when there was actually bridges and songs, so that is so funny, man. But yes, but I just want to say thank you guys for having me, and it was a pleasure, and let's do it again, because there's so many more stories, man. Oh my God. But
yeah, we're gonna have to bring you back.
Congrats to you guys on what you're doing, and I wish you both continued success in what you're doing. Yes, sir.
Absolutely, Bob. Listen, we'll always support what you've got going on, so just keep us in the loop, keep us posted, and we're always there for you. So best of luck with everything.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you guys for the support.